to speak in America about 2008, probably no one in this room has not known or has forgotten about the economic relapse, terrible relapse in the world economy. Israel has shifted out quite safely. On the other hand, and that's why I was running for Knesset, that's why the Zionist Union was running for Knesset. You can see the incitement in Israel is terrible. It's being embraced instead of being pushed out. The gaps, the economic gaps, are growing wider and wider. You see, I don't know if you know the Gini index to show poverty. And that's very challenging. So, whereas the country is developing economically, people need about probably 200 to 300 salaries to get an apartment. That's nowhere realistic. Nowhere realistic. We have amazing startups being built, and on the other hand, we have people who are not able to get education. We have we were always heading, for many, many years, we were heading scientific progress in the world. We see a lot of scientists going away. We see scientists coming back as well, but that is probably one of your strongest challenges, to make sure that they come home. And as I said, Israel is an exceptional place, really exceptional. Were you all there? Have you ever been there? All of you?
We just got back.
You just got back, so am I right? Isn't it exceptional?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
It stays on your body forever.
Exactly, exactly. You get it's like, I get goosebumps when I speak about Israel. But it is my job and it is my obligation to make sure that Israel becomes really what it is, what it needs to be, and that is a Jewish democratic place. And from my perspective, to be Jewish and democratic, there is no choice but to separate from the Palestinians. It is challenging, very challenging. I can tell you that Yitzhak Herzog and Tzipi Livni, who headed the Zionist Union during the campaign, they were speaking about a very long-term negotiation, but negotiate nonetheless. As I said, quicksands. But there's also the swamp that I can't recall in Florida. What's the name of it? Everglades. What do you mean? What are you saying no? Everglades.
No, I just don't know.
I know.
Sorry.
The things I
It's
tell
my
you.
responsibility.
The things I tell you. The Everglades. And that concerns me. That concerns me. I don't want Prime Minister Netanyahu's arm to be twisted. And I can tell you that is really, as Prime Minister, is facing a lot of challenges. I can tell you the Zionist Union supports a lot of his actions in regards to counter-terror, because we don't have any choice. When a 13-year-old kid rides his bikes and stabs another 13-year-old, the Jewish child, a 13-year-old on his bike, Palestinian 13-year-old child, goes and stabs him. The sedition, the incitement, is horrendous. How do you lower the flames? How do you extinguish this terrible incitement? And Abu Mazen carries a lot of responsibility with that when we get into that. But still, I believe my Zionism is so strong. I believe that our place in Israel is so clear and obvious, even if some others don't see it that way, that I'm not afraid to ask myself the difficult questions, and I'm not afraid to criticize. That is my duty, being an MK. That is my duty as a citizen. But it's very, very clear to me that the one thing that Yitzhak Rabin has passed the torch on to me in a very, very obvious way, I'm sure that he didn't think about it that way, but that the torch of being an active citizen. Because he was himself an active citizen. He made a choice not to go and learn. He wanted to be a water engineer because he knew water was a scarce resource, and he was very, very keen on learning how to create more sources for water, how to develop them. But he went into the army because that's what Israel was about at that point, because he felt it was his responsibility. when he was in the political desert and his shoes were filling up with sand, he still continued on because he knew it was a marathon. It wasn't 100 meters run. It was a marathon. That is Israeli politics. It's a marathon. It took me personally 20 years to decide that I'm taking the plunge. I was very, very much involved in all sorts of public activities. I was a women board member at a very young age, and I was heading the Women Corporate Directors, an American organization. I was heading it in Israel. I set up the Forum for Reserve Duty Families, which is very, very important. My husband is a lieutenant colonel in the Armored Corps, and I feel very, very close with that issue. And all sorts of other things. I actually organized 15 of the rallies commemorating Yitzhak Rabin's memories, such as the one that President Clinton was kind enough to take part in last week. And 10 years ago, I was in charge of the last rally that he took part in. I think he understands. It's very interesting. The first time he came to Israel was for Yitzhak Rabin's funeral. But I think he understood Israel through his eyes. And it's not a trivial thing for any head of state in the world to really understand what this place is about. Having the interfaith, having three major religions of the world really come into this earth that we need to see how we live in peace with our neighbors on the one hand, but on the other hand, our neighbors have to decide that they want to live in peace with us. It's very clear to me what it means to be Jewish and democratic. I think in many, many ways, the Jewish and democratic values combine together. It's those who incite and claim to be Jewish. It's those who assassinated Yitzhak Rabin that I'm not sure that understand what Judaism is all about. And I'm saying those because it wasn't just the bullets, and it wasn't just one person. It was people who incite. And I'm very much afraid of people who incite and who use hate as a tool to resolve any kind of political conflict. I always say to people, and I have very close peers in the right wing in Israel, whom I love dearly, and I keep saying to them, it is okay to disagree with Yitzhak Rabin to this day. It's okay to disagree with him. We just need to make sure that he's remembered as the Prime Minister in Israel, the Prime Minister of Israel that was decided against and assassinated for that, because words can kill. I take much consolation in the fact, looking back at American history, looking back at President Kennedy, President Lincoln, and I knew for many, many years, I knew the Gettysburg Address by heart. Because I thought it didn't just change America, it didn't change the world. But I take a lot of consolation looking back at America in the 1950s, for instance, when American black people could not sit in front of the bus, they had to sit in the back. And it's not so many years ago. Change can take place. And the thing about this era, this particular era, because we're 67 years old in Israel, and I'm very, very much afraid. I don't want it to be a century. I'm working towards a millennium at least, because I want my kids to raise their kids in Israel, and their kids in turn. But this era, Mark Zuckerberg, I would call it. Mark Zuckerberg causes us to be less patient, less tolerant, less accepting. And that is a challenge that we need to face in a very brave way, to understand that the internet has given us immense opportunities for the world to become closer, but we need to understand the dangers, and we need to understand how we deal with them. And we're dealing with it in Israel, not always in the best manner, but I think we know, most of the time, I think we know that the duty on our shoulders is very, very heavy, and what the world expects us to do is very, very heavy. Just two last remarks before I open the floor for questions. I said before, the world is hypocritical when it comes to Israel. I did not sleep a wink when Ali Dawabshe in Duma was burnt, a baby, by Jewish terrorists. I did not sleep a wink. But I don't hear the world startled by the fact that Richard Lakin, an Israeli American, died last week of his wounds. A peace activist who died last week. I don't hear any startlation by the world. I don't hear the world startled by what's going on in Syria. And I don't sleep sometimes when I hear what happens in Homs and Damascus and places like that. To put aside the fact that world treasures have been completely destroyed forever and ever. But it's the people that I care about. The refugees in Europe that you see on a daily basis drowning. But nobody speaks of that tragedy. But Israel is the problem of the world. And that offends me. That offends me. I'm not angry at the world. I'm crazy angry about the world. Because I would expect them to do something about what's going on in Syria. I expect the world to come to the side of the people there. But no, Israel is the problem of the world. So it's the hypocrisy that concerns me a lot of the time. And I still, on the same count, say I know my responsibility. I know my responsibility to try and do my best to reach to any kind of settlement. But what do you do when you see that ISIS shot a plane down in Sinai? What do you do when ISIS has just beheaded a man who went to Syria to make sure that his girls that have drafted themselves to ISIS are back, so they beheaded him? What do you do with that kind of fundamentalism? I'm not sure that I have the right solution for that, or anyone has the right solution for that. But Israel is a problem of the world. And that is where I expect the world to be sincere. And to say, even though I expect Israel to negotiate a solution with the Palestinians, and that is an expectation that I respect. On the same count, I expect the world to stop this hypocrisy and make sure that other world conflicts are resolved, and where people are slaughtered, I expect the world not to hush. Our relationship with America is one of our most important assets. I know we tore some of the Jews here apart, in the sense that we made it very, very hard to be on the side of Israel at one point this year. But we need to understand, I don't understand about uranium, I don't understand about plutonium. I do understand about governance. My prior life, I was an expert in corporate governance. Iran has never stood up to any of the deals that she has agreed with the world. Never. To any of the inspections. Never stood up to them. Never. I respect the American president, and I'm certain that his commitment to Israel is as strong as ever, maybe even stronger. But it does not mean that we can look at it the other way and to say that the Iran deal is still to be observed very, very closely in order to understand where we stand, in order to understand if we really got to the point that I understand that President Obama has wanted to reach. That will take us time to understand. But the one thing that we can never compromise about, and I have no doubt in my heart as to President Obama's commitment to Israel and this administration, and I'm sure, I'm hoping for next week's meeting to really, with Prime Minister Netanyahu, to bring that about, that commitment. We cannot ignore that uplifting the sanctions from Iran is a question that we need to tackle. And we will be probably getting to all sorts of points where we will not be so sure if it's getting where we expect it to be. I was hoping, if I would have thought that, uplifting the sanctions would bring us to the point where the regime in Iran is replaced, and the people in Iran don't hate Israel, and they don't hate America. They don't. Just as probably the people in Palestine, most of them at least, don't hate Israel. Don't hate Israelis, I would say. A lot of the Israelis, most Israelis don't hate Palestinians, they hate Arabs. It's sad because most of them probably don't know each other at all. Haven't met an Israeli Jew or Israeli hating Palestinians. That's concerning. But had I thought that would bring a change in regime, then I would probably be rooting for it, because that would mean that Iran has given up on fundamentalism. And as we well know, Iran has not given up on fundamentalism. And that is a world challenge, not an Israeli challenge. And as I said, we're working on the next millennium in Israel. Hoping for maybe more than one, but I'm trying not to be too greedy. Trying to work long term, but I think it was invented for Israel. Always hope for the best, expect the worst. So, Shimon Peres has a wonderful saying about it, and I don't have the privilege to be a pessimist, and I'll tell you why, because he says that a pessimist and an optimist die in the same way. It's just the way they live that is so different from each other. So I don't have the privilege of being despaired. I don't have the privilege of waking up in the morning and thinking, oh, this is so, no. I'm Israeli, I'm Jewish, I'm proud of it. And I thank you so much for your support and your involvement. It is so much appreciated. Thank you.